Ludwig Wittgenstein had once said that philosophy is a battle against the bewitchment of our intelligence by the means of language. You have explored this in your book, Beyond the Limits of Thought, calling it the limits of the expressible. Immanuel Kant had wrestled with the idea of antinomies. How strong is this coupling between logic and language, and then logic and thought? When you talk about these paradoxes, when you talk about these thought experiments, how much of this is just linguistic semantics, party tricks, like you mentioned? This sentence is both true and false. How much of that is just wordplay? Or do you think logic is this real and objective entity out there? Language is just one way of tapping into whatever it is? Or do you think it's a consequence of the language we use?
Well, you're right about Wittgenstein. He changed his views about many things over the course of his life. But the view that you quoted pretty much stays with him most of the time, that philosophical problems are caused by an abuse of language. And once you understand how language works, they disappear.
Yeah.
I certainly don't believe that view. And I don't think many contemporary philosophers believe that view. Which is not to say that some philosophical problems can't be caused by linguistic confusion. So, for example, we might have a philosophical problem which is caused by using a word which has two meanings and getting them confused. That often happens. So once you're clear that there's a confusion about the use of language, then that solves that problem. Maybe you've got a word that is used in two premises. This is a silly example, but suppose it's the word bank. Okay. Now, bank is ambiguous. It can mean where you get your money from, or it can mean what runs down by the side of the river.
Yep.
So if I got two premises, and one is only true because I'm using the word this way, and one's only true if I'm using the word that way, and then I put them together, I'm going to get silly conclusions. Okay, no one would be sort of confused by that. Yeah. But philosophical problems, when a word has different meanings, it's not always as clear as that. Okay, so some philosophical problems probably can be solved by getting clear about language. But often the really hard philosophical problems begin once you've clarified what your language means. So, okay, where do we start? Look, let's take an ethics problem, which is kind of a hot topic at the moment in this country. Okay. Some people think it's immoral and indeed should be illegal to have an abortion. Mm-hmm. Some people think that they have a moral right to an abortion and that, in fact, laws that prevent abortion are themselves immoral, and maybe under certain circumstances. Now, that is not a problem that goes away when you get language clear. Okay, exactly how you define abortion might be contentious, but let's sort of agree on, a reasonable definition of abortion. Well, the word immoral can be kind of be unclear sometimes. Illegal being closer. So, maybe these words need some tidying up and cleaning up. But in the end, even when you've cleaned it up, the disagreement remains, and that problem is not going to be solved by simply paying attention to how you use language. There's something else going on here. Okay, that's the problem of ethics. And interestingly enough, Wittgenstein never really applied his view to ethics. He was much more interested in metaphysics, epistemology, what some philosophers call theoretical philosophy as opposed to practical philosophy. But even when it comes to, theoretical philosophy, I think most philosophers now would hold that you're not going to solve substantial philosophical issues just by getting your words straight. You get your words straight to avoid confusion, and that's where the real problem starts.
So there is something objective, real, mind-independent about logic that exists, that transcends language and thought. Let's run this thought experiment. Let's say aliens land on Earth tomorrow. We don't speak the same language, have varying degrees of intelligence. But do you think there will be mutual agreement on the fact that there is this objective entity out there called logic that we can all ascribe to, and maybe their language ascribes to a much higher level to it?
Well, first of all, don't identify philosophy with logic. I mean, are there hard philosophical problems to which one might hope there's an objective answer, which we haven't which maybe there's no agreement on yet? I think that's true. But your question was specifically about logic. What happens when aliens land? I mean, I'm not. I don't know, obviously. However, let me give you an analogy which I think is telling. And let's come back to the Asian traditions in philosophy again. A lot of Western philosophers have thought that different cultures reason differently. And in fact, the way that the Asian traditions reasoned was wrong. So Arabic reasoning is just, bad reasoning. Indian reasoning is bad reasoning. Chinese reasoning is bad reasoning. That just seems to me to be crazy.
Why was that thought made in the first place? Was it just racially motivated?
Yes.
Oh.
It's a product of colonialism. Look, I mean, the West has taken over Asian countries. I don't think the Middle East is really Asian. I mean, it's as much Western as, Russia, Western Russia. But often it gets sort of categorized as Asian. And there was a book by Said where he coined this term Asianism, which is where you devalue the culture of something you want to take over. So you move in, you want to conquer it, you want to take its resources, you want to subjugate its people. You do that by force, but also what you do is devalue their way of thinking. So yes, when Asianism was employed as by the Western imperialist countries, this was part of it. Now, I've read a lot of texts from the Asian traditions in translation because I can't read the languages. And the good philosophers from those traditions reason exactly the way that I do. So it's not as though, that different traditions have different ways of reasoning. They think of different arguments, sure. But when they reason, they reason much the same way that I do as a philosopher, as a Western trained philosopher. Okay, now maybe Martians are different. Who knows? But I doubt it somehow. So I think that they're very likely to reason the same way that we reason.